The big question of today, of the webinar, is, isn't sugar really just sugar? So we are often confronted, or we observe by consumers or our customers, that sugar still today is often associated with just the white refined sugar that you see dominating the supermarket shelves. Or then consumers are really overwhelmed with the vast terminology that there is in the sugar landscape. What is raw cane sugar versus whole cane sugar? What is really meant with polarisation or saccharose? What is to be understood with molasses or Ikumsa units? Just to give you some examples. Today is really the intention to clear up and shed some light on this terminology landscape, and to make sure that everybody understands all the beautiful details on sugar, and also what PRONATEC really does with this beautiful commodity. For today's agenda, just briefly, I would like to highlight some details on who PRONATEC really is, for the ones of you that don't know us yet. Then I would like to give some basic background on the sugar landscape worldwide, as well as some terminology, before moving really into some qualities of cane sugar, starting with a really historic product that is very important to PRONATEC, the whole cane sugar, which we trade under the name Sucanat, moving on to raw cane sugar, and lastly, but really importantly, highlight some origin partners in the countries that we work with closely for this product. Good. In a nutshell, PRONATEC was founded in 1976 here in Switzerland. We are still headquartered in Winterthur, Switzerland, specialized really in the production and trade of organic and fairly traded raw materials. We started with sugar. In fact, it was the first product to be introduced. Later on, added cocoa. It's finished products as well, cocoa, and later on vanilla and spices as well. We are mainly B2B, not really addressing final consumers, but really targeting the industry. And we have clients across Europe and the United States, as well as now with some Asian markets that are recently added to the portfolio. Now you can see the landscape overall of our origin partners. It's a big focus on Latin America, and particularly a big focus from a sugar perspective on Paraguay. Paraguay is the primary sugar origin, because Paraguay really was the pioneer to introduce organic sugar and export organic sugar in the 70s, 80s. Today, many more countries produce organic quality, but it's still a very big focus for PRONATEC to do business with Paraguay. We have, of course, very different origins as well, apart from Paraguay, depending on what quality that is needed. Argentina, Brazil is a big focus area. And then on different products, cocoa, for example, the focus is on the Dominican Republic, with our fully owned subsidiary, Yacao, in place, as well as Colombia and Peru are the dominant countries for those products. In a nutshell, what is our approach to doing business, and how do we really contribute? This is our idea to be involved in the full value chain of all of our raw materials. So basically, from cultivation all the way to resale of the final product. You can see a typical supply chain in a typical industry would look much more what you see in the bottom of this chart, bottom half of this chart, where you have many different players, intermediaries involved in the different steps of the supply chain. This obviously comes at a huge compromise. We believe traceability is lost if you have too many intermediaries in the supply chain. The impact at origin, which is sort of the DNA of PRONATEC, what we try to achieve, is really minimized. and also you sacrifice a lot on quality assurance the more players that you have in the supply chain. So our direct sourcing approach is key, and we have this across all of our raw materials in the portfolio. So setting the scene on the sugar landscape, just to give some basic background on terminology before we move on later on into some of our products. Basically, you can classify worldwide the production of sugar in two types. In the northern hemisphere, really what you see in green here in the landscape or in the world map are all the countries that focus on beet sugar production. And then in the southern hemisphere, the dark blue highlights here are the countries that focus on cane production. There are some exemptions. For example, Chile, as you can see, is marked as green. They really produce beet sugar. That's just because of the climate that favors beet sugar production there as well. Then in the light blue, you can see some countries that actually focus on both, on beet and cane. That would be the United States, some Northern African countries such as Morocco, and also some Southeast Asian countries that produce both because climate permits. But for PRONATEC, really the focus is the dark blue. We only focus on cane sugar production and trade. So we are not involved in beet, in offering beet sugar. Moving on, some backgrounds and basics on terminology. You can classify sugar according to, as we saw, the raw material that it derives from, so cane sugar versus beet sugar, or also by its quality of the final product. That would be raw sugar, as in the sense of unprocessed or unrefined, or then the white sugar, which is then the very much processed sugar and refined sugar. So cane, you can see a picture in the top left. It's really, botanically speaking, it's just a grass. It's very easy to grow if climate permits, obviously. Doesn't need a lot of treatment. It's relatively simple as well for organic production, especially comparing to beet, the sugar beet, as you can see in the right side of the picture, which is quite intense in its cultivation, as well specifically on organic production. It's much more tricky to produce organic with beet than it is with the cane sugar. Now, as I mentioned before, PRONATEC, we are really just involved in the cane, raw, be it in all types of formats, as we'll see later, but it's really raw cane sugar or white cane sugar. Good. If there's any questions on terminology still, please feel free to put it in the Q&A question, and we'll try to address it at the end of this webinar. But moving on now to whole cane sugar. Whole cane sugar, also known as sucanat, it's the trade name, trademark name, I have to say, from PRONATEC since the very beginning. And it's, as I mentioned to you before, it's a product of really high historical importance for PRONATEC. It was the first product that we introduced in the overall company, 1976. And it's special because it's really a traditional product still today in many of our origin countries where we are involved. Now, to understand it, whole, what does whole mean, comes from the terminology like whole foods. You can associate really unprocessed. Sugar is the key here. So it's nothing else but dried sugarcane juice. We will see images later on how it's produced, but a very simple production process and no big technology involved, but it is of huge importance and relevance to our origin countries and the cooperatives that we work with for this product. It's traditional, very traditional in many Southern American, Latin American countries, I have to say, not just South America, but also Central America, as well as Asia. Some people might know it under the name panela, moscovado, jaggery is also quite known for this product, or rapadura. Now, it is associated with being sort of the healthier type of sugar because it does still contain many nutrients and minerals versus refined sugar. There's we'll see that in more detail later, is a high rest molasses content, which really gives it the color as well as the nutrients. And we see it very popular in the chocolate industry. But also in the retail product section, where basically you see it as just a standard product in retail shelves, consumers enjoying it at home, sweetening their coffee or their tea, but also using it as a tablespoon ingredient in the out-of-home industry, in restaurants or bars, etc. We have some images here on how it is produced. Basically, it starts with a very simple process of cutting the cane in the fields, in very rural, remote areas. You can see in the top left. And then this cane, into the grass, as we mentioned, needs to be transported into a local fabric where it is then further processed. This transport still today is done in a traditional way, sometimes even with oxes or by hand transport. And then from that centralized production facility, the cane is then further produced and processed. So what we can see now here, the pressing of the sugar cane is the next step. The juice needs to be extracted, and very traditional machineries are here still in work and in process. These are called, in Latin America, these are called trapiches. So central stations that really just allow for pressing the juice out of this sugar cane that we see in these pictures. So the extracted sugar juice or cane juice then goes to an evaporation stage. You can see it's often done on open fire. And to really move that juice all the way that it gets to a thick syrup quality, kind of, where it is then basically just pulverized into its final form and dried into the different qualities in terms of granulometry, crystal size that is wanted in the final product. So a lot of handwork and manual work you can see that is applied in this production of whole cane sugar. And I think we have a short video that we want to show you that highlights this even better with some more and nicer images. I move it to my marketing department to just briefly play the video if possible.
Good, perfect. Okay.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Tabea, for playing this video. Good. So now that we've seen what whole cane sugar is all about, we move to a bit more of a complex and complicated production process with the next product, which is the raw cane, which we at PRONATEC know under the name Siramena, organic raw cane sugar. We look at its production process as it's a bit more technical, and then we also have a video to illustrate the production of raw cane sugar. But to start with, just some basics to understand the main differences for the quality of raw cane versus what we saw in whole cane. So to recap, whole cane, we saw it's really just a dried sugarcane juice. It does contain still many nutrients from that large molasses content and is still present. It has a strong, tasty, somewhat malty flavor to it still, and it is production simple, no need for large capital investments, and it's almost exclusively produced from smallholder cooperatives. Now, moving to the right side, the raw cane sugar, Siramena, you can see it also from the image, it's a much lighter sugar, and the big difference here is that the sugar is crystallized and centrifuged in its production process. So whole cane is not crystallized, it's only dried juice, and raw cane, as opposed, is really crystallized sugar. It is more processed, and we'll see that in the video later. It contains therefore less nutrients and minerals. It's relatively neutral in taste, and important also, it's a much more complex production process. It needs much more capital investments and tends to be traded by larger industrial players as well. So let's briefly go through this production process. Before we show the video, I want to just go talk some details by these slides. I tried to not keep it or get too technical because the video shows it very nicely later on, but some basics are important to understand. Step one here as well, obviously the cane needs to be cut in the fields and then brought to the sugar mill for cane juice extraction before being able to process the juice further. This looks a bit different versus what we saw on Sukana. So it's typically larger planted or larger fields, I have to say. It's not the ox anymore that carries the sugarcane to the central mill, but it's trucks are involved already, and the milling is done really with big industrial machines, so-called sugar mills. Often there's multiple sugar mills in the same production, just to make sure that really the maximum amount of cane juice can be extracted from this sugarcane grass or plant. Then the juice moves on to a clarifying process. Firstly, that's done by adding lime, or the chemical term is calcium hydroxide, into that juice, which then allows the juice to clarify and separate it from any impurities that might still be in the juice. You can see those impurities in this graph at the bottom in a mud tank. It's called mud, but really it's not a waste product, but it is importantly in the organic agricultural field. This mud is then applied onto the fields again and used as a perfect fertilizer. So once that juice is clarified and cleaned, really, it goes through an evaporation process by big tanks that just heat it to the needed temperature. And we can see some images here in the top left side. That's an evaporation tank. And it really thickens the juice into that thick syrup that we saw also before, because that's the needed stage to then move on with the next and important crystallization process. Maybe a side note, but very important in the in the production is the neutralizing of the pH level. So that is also done in this clarifying process. The sugarcane juice that arises from the fields has a relatively acidic pH value. So in the lining and the calcium that is added there, you neutralize to a desired level of 7.0 to about 7.2 pH units. Good. Now comes the really important step. It's the crystallization. So as we saw before, this type of sugar, raw cane, is a crystallized sugar. And here is where the magic happens. Seed crystals are added into this thick syrup in a process around normally 10 to 12 hours. The formation of the crystals starts and happens. Before it is then centrifuged, separating the established crystals from the remaining syrup that is still in place at this stage of production. You can see that in the middle, that separation. Here again, the so-called waste product is molasses, what is known as molasses. But most of you will know that molasses is not really waste. Molasses is a side product that is heavily used in many industries. For example, it's the primary ingredient for rum production. It is also very popular in some beer specialties like stouts or pale ales. Also, the yeast production depends heavily on molasses. So there's really a lot of use of molasses again, and none of this is wasted or lost. Now, once the molasses are separated, really all that happens is a drying process. So the sugar is dried, or the crystals, I have to say, are dried before then the final product is the raw cane sugar. Good, here's some images again, just to illustrate. Top left, you can see the sugar, the formation of the sugar crystals. Then the centrifuge in the top right, before going then to packaging and receiving the final product in the bags. Good, again, hopefully not too much theory. I will try to illustrate this nicely by video that we have prepared from our main origin partner in Paraguay. It's the sugar mill La Felsina, where we show this production of raw cane sugar visually. So let's try to play this. Okay, excellent. This is a nice illustration. I hope everybody was able to see it. So it's, I think it's good to understand and good to see that it's obviously a bit more of an industrial process that we're referring to here. But still in traditional mills, I have to say it's none of the big mills that you might know from other origin countries. Paraguay really is just smaller production focus still today. But I think now that we understand, the main difference of the different products, let's have a look at our complete production portfolio or product portfolio, I have to say. You can see from top left, whole cane sugar, the sucanat we saw, raw cane sugar, the siramena, and then white cane sugar, which is really then refined sugar. It's nothing else but an additional refining process that is done to the siramena that we already saw. And basically what is to understand is that the more processed the sugar gets, the less molasses content the sugar has. So there's a direct correlation. And as you can see, each of these products, so sucanat, siramena, or white refines, are traded in different subcategories still. So you can see sucanat, you have a soft or a dry quality. The raw cane sugar siramena, depending on its color and rest molasses content, it's known as golden or golden light or special light, and same with the refined product. That is the typical standardized terms in the sugar trade are white refined 100 or white refined 45, which refers to the color that becomes a unit. So the main characteristics or product quality attributes for sugar are polarisation, also known as saccharose. That's really just a sweetener ingredient in the product. And you can see here as well that the more unrefined the product is, the lower that number is obviously. So sucanat, we're in the range of typically between 80 and 90% of saccharose, whereas a refined sugar is nearly 100% just pure saccharose or sweetener content, okay? And then the other key characteristic is the color, which is measured in Tecumseh units. As well here, the direct correlation, the less processed it is, the higher the Tecumseh unit. So some sucanats have values of above 10,000 Tecumseh units, whereas the refined sugar, as the name says, WRF 45 has Tecumseh units 45, so almost nothing. It's pure white with no remaining color. And then also the humidity level, the more processed, the drier the product really gets. Now, I think it's important to understand that depending on what industry the focus is, obviously the different types of these sugars has more of a meaning, okay? So we saw sucanat, the whole cane sugar, is very popular in the chocolate industry, or a sweetener ingredient in the out-of-home, restaurants, etc. Moving more to the raw cane sugar, so the middle part, that's hugely popular in the baking and biscuits industry, as well as in dairy. So yogurts are often used with these types of sugar, ice creams as well. The key characteristic here really is that you have enough sweetener power, but still have that interesting malty or flavorful note that a raw cane sugar is able to provide to the final product. And then lastly, the refined is, in our case, mainly relevant for the drinks industry. So, if you produce a light syrup where you really just want a sweetener ingredient, but no color that falsifies or or changes the output of your product, then just a white refined product would be the right choice. Okay. Good. Now, lastly, but definitely not least important, are the origin partners, especially for PRONATEC. We put a heavy focus on the work that we do with our partners in the different regions. We're very engaged in any project that we have that provides sugar for us and our customers. And I just want to highlight this in this world map. You can see in the landscape, colored in brown are the focus areas of sucanat, so the whole cane sugar. Main project is in Colombia with the cooperative Molienda Real. It's also azúcar in Costa Rica, an important origin for whole cane production. Then, as I mentioned in the introduction, Paraguay is the key origin for Siramena, so the raw cane sugar. Historically so, with long partnerships with the mills in place there, and also it really was the first country to provide organic raw cane sugar for the market. So La Felcina, we saw the video from, is the main partner, but also we have Argentina, as well as recently added Mozambique with very nice cooperative projects that provide the raw cane for our clients. We do have occasionally Brazil and India as well as partners. Obviously, they have their advantages as well in production. They're very efficient mills typically in place there, but larger mills, also known for larger plantations and not a small cooperative structure. So if need be, we do work with selected partners in Brazil and India as well. But the focus area really is Paraguay, Argentina, and Mozambique. Then we see coconut sugar, which we have not discussed at all, but that we source from our partner in Indonesia. It's colored in orange. Now, what we believe is really important here to add is that out of conviction, we do not link any of our sugar types to the stock market. As some of you will know, sugar is a commodity traded on international stock exchanges, and we just, by conviction, refuse to have a correlation to these markets because we just believe in the long-term partnerships with the origin countries, which also means long-term price perspective and not the fluctuation that you see by speculations that drive up or down selected commodity markets. So that's a principle that we're very keen and having a close eye on. Okay. Now, La Felcina, we've seen the video, but just to give you some more backgrounds or details, it's actually one of the oldest sugar mills to produce organic sugar. It started in the 1990s, and in the 1990s already we started the partnership. So PRONATEC is involved since the very beginning with this sugar mill. In the early days, it involved a lot of knowledge transfer for the cultivation of organic sugarcane and also the production of organic. The special requirements that are needed. Some obviously financial investments as well in production facilities, but today it's such a good partnership and a reliable mill that produces all the qualities that PRONATEC needs, as well as all the certifications that are requested by our clients, and also volume security. You know, this is such a good partnership that we're really stable in volume development. And that's just key for PRONATEC, and it's a good win-win relationship for La Felcina. You can see here in the map, for those of you who have been to Paraguay or know it, it's situated about 30 kilometers south of Asunción, the capital. And as I said, pure focus on the production of organic raw cane sugar, turning the grass, the sugar cane, into its final product, sugar. Then I want to spend some time on Azucate Cooperative, also in Paraguay, which is a perfect example of the important work that PRONATEC does in origin countries. So Azucate is a cooperative founded in 2002, also pretty much in the early stages when PRONATEC was involved with La Fresina, and today holds about 200 smallholder farmers. And smallholder, by definition, means 10 hectares or less of cultivation area. As some of you might know, the typical products, and that's not just for the sugar cane industry, but in any raw material trade really, is that smallholders often lack bargaining power. If they're not set up as a corporate or corporation, the cooperative structure, then they lack bargaining power, are not able to achieve solid prices on the market, and that's the big problems of smallholders. So this grouping into cooperative is immensely important work, and this is just one example of how the positive effect can be done. As well, smallholders have low technical resources, often no harvesting machine, no pre-harvesting machines that allows them to efficiently run their fields and therefore also reduce the production costs. So the cooperative kicks in here and provides this technical support. And last but not least, agricultural practices. The knowledge is often missed and not present by smallholders to produce organic and the different qualities that are needed by the international markets. Yeah, so here you can see on the map, on the image, how these farmers are scattered around Guarambaré, which is the city where La Fresina is in, and each of these farmer transports its sugarcane into the central milling station and allows it to further process. Now, as I mentioned, it's important that these cooperatives are democratic structures, so there's reunions quite regularly and frequently to decide as a group what projects we should invest in, and with premiums received from the international label standards such as fair trade or fair for life. And as a group, it is decided what product is most meaningful to the cooperative to then really increase the efficiency of this network. Good. Last but not least, the topic of sustainability. It's quite a hot topic, especially here for us in Europe at the moment. What is more sustainable, beet sugar or fair trade cane sugar? There have been many studies published in recent years. One in 2008, where the outcome was very clear that sugar, that was a study done in Switzerland, that where sugar from, example, Paraguay taken as a reference, cane sugar is much less environmental polluter versus beet sugar that is grown in Europe or other parts of the world. Different studies that came up during recent years sort of proved the complete opposite, that cane sugar is less environmental friendly, has more CO2 footprint than beet sugar. But for us here at PRONATEC, the answer is quite clear to this debate. It really depends on which sustainability aspect you give more weight. And that gives your answer to what is more sustainable, beet production organic or cane production organic. We have a good piece or more elaboration on this topic in our sustainability report, which you can see on the webpage. But in a nutshell, I want to just highlight for everybody, in our view, the key advantages and disadvantages of beet and cane production. So it started with beet or sugar, which is in European standards, often very modern infrastructure, big plants. It has the advantage of being a local product. But then as a disadvantage, it is, as I said already at the beginning, sugar beet is a very sensitive plant, which is not easy, or actually, I have to say, really tricky to produce in organic quality. So it's highly intensive in the agricultural practices versus cane. And one really important factor for us is that beet sugar production is fully dependent on agricultural subsidies. So be it at farm level or be it at the production level in the plants, also import barriers that protect beet sugar. It's a very protected market. Without these impacts in place by government, beet sugar would really, at least for a European perspective, not be present because it would financially just not be lucrative. Okay. Then on the opposite side, the cane sugar, as you can guess, the advantage is that it's profitable throughout the entire supply chain without subsidies. It's easily grown, self-reliant in energy. We saw that in the video. 100% energy comes from the resources in the production itself. No foreign energy needed. And then important for PRONATEC is the development effect. All the work we do with the cooperatives to increase the standard of living in these origin countries. Lastly, as obviously the disadvantage for cane sugar is that it is not a local product. You don't have that bonus in most consumer regions, and tends to have more older infrastructure versus what we see in many beet producing countries. But as I said, very hot debate, a lot of arguments for and against, and I would welcome everybody to please read our sustainability report so that you can form your own opinion on this question. Good. I think we've already reached the end. Thank you very much for participating and for your interest in this topic.